The room didn't explode when he said it. There was no shouting, no immediate outrage, no one jumped to their feet. Instead, something else happened. It went quiet. Not the comfortable kind of silence, but the heavy kind, the kind that presses against your chest, the kind that makes people stop breathing for half a second longer than normal. You could hear chairs shift. A pen paused mid-sentence. A camera operator forgot to adjust focus. Cameras were rolling. Every red light was on. Microphones sat inches from his mouth, live, unforgiving, recording every syllable exactly as spoken. There would be no editing this out later, no walking it back, no claiming it was taken out of context. Filipinos don't take punishment well, the man said calmly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't sneer. He didn't sound angry or emotional. That was what made it worse. Once you hit them clean, he continued, almost casually, they break. The sentence didn't land like trash talk. It landed like a verdict. The speaker wasn't a troll looking for attention. He wasn't an internet personality chasing clicks. He wasn't a loudmouth trying to sell tickets. He was one of Europe's most respected boxing minds. A man whose words carried weight. A man whose fighters were known for ending careers. A man who had built his reputation on being right more often than not. That was why the room stayed silent. Because when someone like him speaks, people don't rush to argue. They listen. And in that moment, without realizing it, he didn't just insult a fighter. He challenged an entire identity, a culture, a history forged in endurance rather than hype. And what followed was not just a fight, not just an upset, not just a viral clip. It would change careers, rewrite reputations, and force the boxing world to confront a truth it had ignored for far too long about toughness and where it really comes from. Declan Byrne had earned the right to speak, with confidence, not because he was loud, not because he needed attention, but because his resume spoke long before he ever opened his mouth. Former European champion, 3 decades inside the sport, hundreds of rounds in world-class gyms, fighters trained across Ireland and the United Kingdom, men known for one thing above all else, knockout power, relentless pressure, the ability to break opponents physically and mentally. Byrne wasn't known for hype. He was known for results. When his fighters stepped into the ring, people expected violence, and more often than not, they got it. That's why when Byrne spoke, people didn't interrupt. They listened. So when he took his seat at the centre table in Manchester that cold February afternoon, reporters leaned forward instinctively. Cameras adjusted their angles. Pens hovered, ready. This wasn't just another routine press conference filled with recycled quotes and polite answers. This was the final build-up to a high-stakes, welterweight eliminator. A fight that would decide who moved closer to a world title and who faded quietly into the background. Careers were on the line. Beside Byrne sat his fighter, Liam Iron Callahan, 6 feet tall, broad shoulders that strained against his jacket, thick forearms earned through years of grinding camps and brutal sparring. Callahan carried himself like a man used to imposing his will. His record spoke clearly. Opponents didn't lose decisions against him. They got stopped. Violently. Across the table, however, the energy shifted. There were no crossed arms, no smirks, no intimidation games, just a much quieter presence. An older Filipino trainer named Ernesto Valdez. His hair was streaked with grey. His posture relaxed, almost gentle. Hands folded neatly in front of him, as if he were waiting patiently rather than defending a fighter's future. Beside him sat Joe Lightning Cruz, smaller than Callahan. Lean instead of thick. No expensive watch. No loud suit. He didn't stare anyone down. He didn't lean back. He didn't project anything. He simply sat there, still, calm, eyes forward. No intimidation tactics. No trash talk. No visible reaction at all. just the kind of quiet that doesn't ask to be noticed, but refuses to be shaken. And in that contrast, loud certainty on one side, silent composure on the other, a story had already begun to take shape long before the first punch would ever be thrown. The question came from the back of the room. It wasn't shouted, it wasn't dramatic, just calm, professional. "Coach Byrne," the reporter said, "what do you expect from the Filipino challenger?" Byrne didn't pause to think. He didn't glance at his fighter. He didn't look toward the opposing corner. He leaned forward immediately, elbows resting on the table, eyes steady on the microphones in front of him. "Filipinos are skilled," he said. The room stayed quiet. "Fast, technical," a few heads nodded. That part sounded fair. Then his tone shifted, subtly but unmistakably. "But they don't take punches well." A few people shifted in their seats. "Once real power lands," Byrne continued, voice calm and assured, "they fold. No hesitation, no qualifiers. That's always been the case." A ripple moved through the room, not shouting, not outrage. Just that low, uneasy murmur that spreads when something uncomfortable has been said out loud. Byrne wasn't finished. "This isn't disrespect," he added, almost conversationally. "It's just experience. I've seen it over and over. My fighter won't need many rounds." Cameras snapped instantly toward the other side of the table, toward Ernesto Valdez. Everyone expected a reaction. Anger, defensiveness, a sharp reply. Valdez didn't offer any of it. He smiled. Not sarcastically, not forced, just a small, calm smile, as if he had heard something familiar. "That's okay," he said softly, his voice barely rising above the hum of the room. "Some lessons are better learned in the ring." For a brief moment, no one spoke. Then Byrne laughed. A short, confident laugh. "I've been doing this longer than your fighter's been alive," he said, shaking his head. "I know what breaks." And in that moment, without a punch thrown, the damage was done. The lines were drawn, the story was set, and there was no going back. The headlines spread within hours, not days, not slowly, hours. Boxing websites pushed notifications. Sports radio replayed the quote on loop. Social media clipped the moment and stripped it of context. Just the words, sharp and unforgiving. Irish fans praised Byrne's honesty. They called it confidence, experience, a man telling the truth without sugarcoating it. To them, it sounded like realism. Filipino fans felt something deeper, something heavier. This wasn't just criticism of a single fighter. It wasn't just pre-fight hype. It sounded familiar, the kind of statement they'd heard before, in gyms, in tryouts, in boardrooms, in places where decisions were made before they ever entered the room. This wasn't about one fight. It was about identity. About being told once again that skill was acceptable, but toughness was questioned. That speed was acknowledged, but durability was doubted. Forums filled overnight. Old fight clips resurfaced, slow-motion replays, threads arguing about heart, chin, and resilience. Some defended Byrne, some defended Cruz. Most argued about something much bigger than boxing. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds. But in a small gym thousands of miles away, Joel Cruz said nothing. No tweets, no interviews, no subtle shots. He didn't clap back. He didn't explain. He didn't defend his country or his name with words. He trained. Morning runs before sunrise. Rounds that went longer than planned. Body shots absorbed without complaint. While the internet argued, Cruz prepared to answer in the only language that mattered. The ring. In Dublin, Callahan's camp was intense and loud. Music thumped through the walls from morning to night. Heavy bass. Aggressive rhythms meant to fuel aggression. Sparring sessions were brutal and short. Fresh partners rotated in constantly. Every round was treated like a war. The message was simple, repeated daily. Break him early. Power was the identity. Pressure was the solution. If something didn't work, they hit harder. Coaches shouted instructions between rounds, timers buzzed, ice packs slapped against swelling knuckles. It was efficient, professional, built for destruction. And it had worked many times before. In Manila, Cruz trained differently. There was no entourage, no cameras, no countdown clock on the wall reminding anyone of hype. The gym was small, mirrors cracked from age and humidity. Paint peeled from the walls. Electric fans rattled more than they cooled. Sometimes they stopped working entirely. Rounds didn't end when the bell rang. They ended when Valdez said they were done. Valdez didn't teach Cruz to avoid pain. He taught him to understand it, to roll punches at the last possible instant, so power slid instead of exploded, to take shots on bone, not soft tissue, to accept impact without tension, letting the body move instead of resist. Most importantly, he taught him to breathe when others panic, when lungs burned, when legs felt heavy, when the mind screamed for relief. Because panic wastes energy, and energy is life in a fight. This wasn't just boxing. It wasn't about combinations or footwork alone. It was survival discipline, a way of staying functional under pressure learned not in comfort, but in environments where quitting was never an option. And while one camp prepared to end a fight quickly, the other prepared to outlast it. The O2 arena was sold out. Every seat filled, every aisle packed. A low, constant roar hung in the air long before the first bell ever rang. Green flags rippled across one side of the arena, waving in tight clusters. Irish chants rolled downward from the upper levels, rhythmic and confident, bouncing off steel and concrete. On the opposite side, a different rhythm answered. Red, blue, and yellow flags rose and fell together. Filipino voices blended into a single chant, steady and unified, growing louder with every passing second. The arena wasn't just full, it was divided. Callahan entered first. Music thumped as he stepped through the curtain. Shoulders loose, jaw set. He shadowboxed on the walk to the ring. Punches snapping sharply through the air, each one thrown with bad intentions. He climbed the steps quickly, bounced once on the canvas, and rolled his shoulders like a man eager to get started. Confident, loose, violent. He leaned against the ropes and stared across the ring, already visualizing the finish. Then Cruz followed. No dramatic lighting. No extended entrance. He walked calmly, eyes forward, breathing steady. No shadowboxing, no pacing. Just focus. He stepped into the ring, wiped his feet on the canvas out of habit, and moved directly to his corner. Valdez met him there, placing a hand briefly on his shoulder. No speech, no reminders. Everything had already been said. The referee called both fighters to the center. Final instructions. Protect yourselves at all times, obey my commands, touch gloves. They did. Callahan's stare was hard, unblinking. Cruz's expression didn't change. They turned and walked back to their corners. The crowd rose to its feet. The bell rang, and just like that, everything that had been said would have to be proven. Round 1. Callahan came out hard, not feeling the distance, not probing, hard. His jab snapped out immediately, stiff and heavy, driving Cruz's head back before he could fully settle into rhythm. The right hand followed close behind, thrown with bad intentions, the kind meant to make a statement early. One punch landed clean. Leather cracked against bone, and Cruz's head snapped sideways. The sound echoed through the arena. The crowd erupted. Irish flags waved wildly. Shouts poured down from the stands. This is exactly what Byrne was talking about, the commentator said, voice rising with excitement. That power is real. Most fighters don't take that shot and stay upright. Cruz took a step back. Another. He reset his feet. For a brief moment, it looked like the prediction might come true. Then Cruz stepped forward again. No rush, no panic. He slipped inside the next jab and buried a short hook into Callahan's body. The punch wasn't flashy. It didn't draw a roar, but it landed deep. Callahan exhaled sharply and pulled his elbows in a fraction of a second too late. Round 2. Callahan pressed again. The right hand came back faster this time. Cleaner. It landed flush on Cruz's head. Cruz absorbed it, rolled with it at the last instant, letting the force slide instead of explode. Then he answered. 2 punches. 1 to the ribs, 1 to the chest. Callahan took a step back without realizing it. He frowned. Not in pain, in confusion. Because the shots he had relied on his entire career were landing, and the man in front of him was still there. Still balanced, still breathing calmly. Something wasn't adding up. And for the first time that night, doubt began to flicker. By round 4, the signs appeared. They weren't dramatic. No knockdowns, no wild exchanges, just small details. Callahan began breathing through his mouth between combinations. His chest rose higher. His shoulders lifted slightly with every inhale. Punches that had snapped sharply in the first 2 rounds now came wider, longer, less compact. The snap was fading. Cruz, meanwhile, looked unchanged, still calm, still balanced, still moving with the same quiet rhythm he'd carried from the opening bell. His breathing stayed controlled. His eyes stayed clear. Every time Callahan attacked, he had to work. Every jab meant a reset. Every right hand required full commitment. And every time he committed, Cruz made him pay. A touch to the body, a short counter upstairs, a step that forced Callahan to turn his hips again. Not enough to excite the crowd, enough to drain him. Every Callahan attack cost him energy. Every Cruz counter cost Callahan breath. It was subtle, almost invisible to casual eyes. But to anyone who understood fighting, this wasn't brute force. It was chess. And Cruz was thinking 2 moves ahead. Valdez had taught Cruz something Byrne had never truly encountered. Not because it didn't exist, but because it rarely announced itself. Filipino panuntukan principles. Not flashy, not theatrical. Close range control instead of wide exchanges. Energy management instead of constant output. Punishment economics instead of emotional trading. The philosophy was simple. Make the opponent spend more than you do. Every punch they throw should cost them 2 things: energy and confidence. Cruz didn't block punches just to survive. He redirected them, rolled them, let them glance off bone instead of sinking into muscle. He never met power head-on unless he had to. And when he did, he answered to the body. Always the body. By round 6, Callahan's legs slowed. Not visibly at first, just a half-step late. A turn that took a fraction longer than before. His feet still moved, but they didn't float anymore. By round 7, his ribs ached. Every breath reminded him. Every twist burned. His elbows dropped instinctively, just enough to open the head. Cruz noticed. He always did. By round 8, doubt crept in. Not panic, not fear. Something worse, confusion. Because Callahan had done everything right. He had landed, he had pressed, he had imposed himself. And yet the man in front of him wasn't fading, wasn't breaking, wasn't giving him the ending he had promised. That's when doubt becomes heavy. And heavy thoughts, slow, fast hands. Because by then Cruz wasn't just fighting Callahan's body anymore. He was fighting his belief. And belief, once cracked, never recovers the same way again. Round 9, the shift became undeniable. Cruz stepped in behind a quiet jab, not to score, but to close distance. Callahan tried to fire back, but his feet lagged just enough for Cruz to beat him inside. Then it landed. A perfectly placed body shot. Short, compact, devastating. The punch dug deep beneath the ribs, right into the liver. Callahan's face changed instantly. Not from surprise, but from shock. His breath left him in a sharp, helpless gasp as his legs betrayed him. He dropped to one knee. The arena erupted. Not just cheers, disbelief. Irish chants fell silent. Filipino voices surged. On the apron, Byrne stood frozen. No instructions came, no shouting, just stillness. He watched his fighter struggle to rise, watched the count reach 8 before Callahan dragged himself upright. His legs shook. His eyes searched for clarity that wasn't there. The bell saved him, but it didn't reset him. Round 10. Cruz knew. He stepped forward immediately, cutting the ring, forcing Callahan backward with measured pressure. There was no rush, no recklessness, only control. Combination after combination, jab to the body, right hand upstairs, left hook that forced Callahan into the ropes. Callahan tried to cover up, but his guard came late. His arms were heavy, his reactions slower than they had ever been. Cruz didn't let him rest. Another combination, then another. The ropes held Callahan up when his legs no longer could. The referee stepped in. He didn't hesitate. He waved his arms and pulled Cruz away. It was over. The prediction had died in front of everyone. And in its place stood something undeniable, a lesson learned the hardest way possible. Cruz didn't celebrate. He bowed. Byrne sat alone. Later, he faced the cameras. "I was wrong," he said. "I confused power with toughness." Cruz spoke quietly. "In my country," he said, "we don't talk about toughness, we live it. This wasn't just a fight, it was a lesson. That silence can be stronger than noise, that intelligence can outlast force, and that toughness isn't always loud. Sometimes it just keeps standing."